So how are we doing, Mario? Ready to proceed? Okay. Right. Good evening and welcome to Hackney's Planning Committee. Just to say, the council will be recording this meeting and proceedings are being live streamed now on YouTube. My name is Councillor Vincent Stotts and I shall be chairing this evening's meeting. We'll be undertaking the meeting in as close a fashion as we can do to how we have previously. And just to say that the virtual meeting technology does have a chat function. Please only use that function if you want to communicate about IT. I nor anybody else will really be reading that. When your camera's turned on, just remember that people can see you. All the participants need to stay in the room during the item, particularly councillors. Only one person may speak at a time. And if you've registered to speak, turn your microphone on when you're asked to speak. If there is any disruption, we do have the ability to evict you. Please don't disrupt the meeting. If there's any reason there's an internet outage, we'll try and reconvene if we can. If any committee members get lost in the ether somewhere during the item, I'm afraid they won't be able to participate in the decision. And any committee members unable to participate, say, won't be allowed to take the decision if they for some reason are out. Can I then first ask members to introduce themselves? I'll do it from Katie. So can you introduce yourself, please?
Good evening, Councillor Katie Hanson.
Steve.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Good evening. Steve Rice, Councillor Steve Rice.
Steve Rice. Susan.
Good evening, Councillor Susan Fajano Thomas here. Thank you.
Okay. Claire.
Hello. Good evening, Councillor Claire Potter.
Thank you. That's 6 of us this evening. We've also got sorry?
I get ignored.
Who's that? Oh, Brian, you've turned up. Sorry, Brian. One more. Brian, please introduce yourself.
I'm Councillor Brian Bell.
Thank you very much.
Don't have your camera on, so you may not be pinned to the top of people's screens.
No, he's now got his camera on. He's okay. Right, so we've also got Natalie, our head of planning, Tom, legal officer, and Gareth, who some of you will have spoken to, who's our committee officer. There are planning and design officers and transport officers here to help us this evening. Before moving to the agenda, I'll take a couple of minutes to say how this will proceed. We'll hear each application summarised by the officers, a 5-minute statement from objectors and a 5-minute statement from the applicant. Plus, because we've got Councillor Maxwell here this evening, she gets a 5 minutes extra for herself, and the applicants will actually get 10 minutes because of that. It's my role as chair to make sure members have all the information they need to make a decision, objectors and applicants have their say, and that the meeting runs properly. I'll not be taking any contribution from the floor, as you must have given notice by registering to speak. As I've said, objectors will be strictly timed, and so please don't overrun. Members are not representing either their wards nor their political parties. We make our decisions on the basis of any site visits we've made, what we've read in the reports, and of course what we hear tonight. We must only take account of policies adopted by the Council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Members making the decision should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any application prior to the meeting. Similarly, if they have any interest in the application site or the people involved, they'll declare that interest and may remove themselves from the decision. If they have an interest in the decision and they have to leave the room, we'll organise to get them called back in. I don't think that's going to happen tonight. When we've finished our deliberations, we'll vote on the recommendation. I'll describe the voting procedure before we vote. When the decision is made, that's the end of the matter of the committee. The applicant may appeal our decision, and anybody else can seek legal redress. I advise you to take professional advice in either case. I'll now move to the agenda. Declarations of interest. Are there any?
Chair, I think we meant to do apologies first.
Oh, have we?
Yeah, yeah.
Apologies.
Yes.
Apologies for not doing apologies.
Yes.
Okay, I've got Councillor Joseph and Councillor Levy there.
That's correct. That's what I have, Councillor Stobbs.
Okay. Any more? No, we haven't got substitutes, have we?
No.
Declarations of interest. Just to say, we've received a number of emails from residents of interest in the Thoresby House application. Just to say to everybody, some or all of those may not have been read variously, so we must please, officers, assume that you need to brief us on them all. Any other declarations of interest? No. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, I've read these and I'm happy with them. Has anybody else got any? Okay, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say I've also received an email, which I think other committee members have in relation to item 6 as
Okay.
well, from
Okay.
which you didn't mention. That was all.
Item 6, have you?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? So generally we've all received stuff from people variously about 2 items this evening. So the minutes, any issues with the minutes for anybody? No? Okay. Well, when we get back to coming into the office at some point, we'll sign them. We'll consider them virtually signed.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. And now we'll move on. I've got no other proposals or recommendations referred to us. So we'll go straight on to Thoresby House on Thoresby Street. I popped down there to have a look yesterday, so I know the site reasonably well. So over to you, Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will just bring up the presentation now.
And Steve, you need to speak up or get closer to your...
Sorry, Chair. I'll just bring up the presentation now.
That's okay. That's about right. Thank you.
Right. Can everybody see the presentation and hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Oh, I can.
Okay, good. Okay, so item 5, Thoresby House, Thoresby Street. This is the site location plan for the site. This context plan just shows the site in a little bit more detail. So it's just to the north of City Road, on the east side of Thoresby Street. It's surrounded by the McDonald's drive-through and petrol filling station on the opposite side of the street, and then you've got Buxton Court, which is a housing development to the east. So you've also got City Road to the south, and beyond City Road, further to the south, is Islington, and then also Windsor Terrace is to the east as well. So here are some photos showing the site. So this is the existing building. It's currently used as student accommodation as part of Arcadia University, which is a United States higher education institution, and they students come over to attend courses at universities in London for limited periods. And the building used to be nurses' accommodation as part of the Royal Chest Hospital, which surrounded the site, and this which has been demolished over the years. And this building is the last sort of remaining building which formed part of the Royal Chest Hospital. And some further views of the site. This is Thoresby Street looking southwards, and you can see the side elevation there of the application site. And then again a little bit further away, so you can see these blocks which form part of the Buxton Court estate. This is a view from City Road looking eastward towards the site. So in the foreground you've got taller buildings which are within the London Borough of Islington, surrounding the City Road basin, and then you can see the McDonald's sign there and the petrol filling station roof, and the site is sort of just behind that. And then if you look down in the distance, you can see sort of further taller buildings which are in the Shoreditch area or around City Road. And And this is a view from City Road looking west. So you've got the Buxton Court behind those trees, and then the application site behind that building there. And then again, this is from Windsor Terrace. There's a sort of crescent of open space just off City Road here. And then you've got Buxton Court here, and then the site is just behind that. And then these buildings are within Islington, within the around City Road and the City Road Basin. And this is the rear of the site that you can see from Windsor Terrace. This is the view rear of the site here, and then this is 19 to 42 Buxton Court, which is one of the blocks within the within the Buxton Court estate. And then there's a area of open space and a children's play area here just immediately to the east of the application site. This is the 1 to 18 Buxton Court, which is just to the south of the application site, and this is at the north elevation of that block. And then this is the view standing adjacent to 19 to 42. So this is the north elevation of Buxton Court. There's a garage courts here, just immediately to the north of the application site. This is just a more detailed plan showing the footprint of the building. So the existing building takes up pretty much all the application site. There's a small areas of hard paving here. This is the garages that you can see in the photo, the play area there. And then moving on to the proposals, which is to demolish the existing building and erection of a 12-storey block of new student accommodation. And so you can see the footprint of the proposals here. And then this shows the ground floor plan. So you've got the entrance onto Thoresby Street. You've got the sort of setback colonnade here at the ground floor level. So which increases the sort of the apparent width of the footway. It gives a bit more space at the entrance. So you've got reception here coming into the into the development. Refuse collection access to the north here, adjacent to those garages. And the basement level, basement storage and cycle parking, and plant and laundry as well. And then there's a mezzanine level with a teaching space, which will also be available for hire by the local community as well when it's not in use. And various other sort of lounge and breakout areas. And then moving up to the student rooms, so there's a sort of combination of single rooms, dormitory rooms, and then also with communal kitchen dining rooms as well on each floor. At the 11th floor, there's a sort of a setback, and then you've got a roof terrace area here along the south side of the building, and then at roof level, photovoltaic panels as well as a green biodiverse roof. Onto the elevations, so the proposals have evolved as a result of a presentation to the design review panel, and it's the facades are brick facades with these sort of deep recessed window reveals with these sort of beveled detailing, which sort of picks up on the some of the brickwork details which you see on some of the surrounding buildings and the existing building on the site. And then at the ground floor, you can see that sort of double height colonnade space, which provides more space at the public realm and the entrance to the site. This is the east elevation facing the children's play area, and the north elevation, and the south elevation. And this just shows a sort of the ground floor level in a bit more detail. So you've got the step brickwork with where these window reveals are, and you can see the sort of in terms of the tone of the brickwork, it picks up on some of the colours and tones that you find on the existing building and also in the surrounding area. This is just the elevation facing Thoresby Street, similar to the other one there. And then this is the south elevation, and so there is some landscaping in the space between the edge of the site and the development itself. and replacement tree planting. And then this is the rear elevation facing the court, facing the play area, and again the sort of north side of the rear elevation. Just moving on now to some views of the building from wider view. So this is the view from City Road, and you can see before we could see those trees and Buxton Court, and then the development will appear above those trees, and then you can see within the context of some of the other buildings around City Road. And then this is a view from City Road looking east, and then you can see the proposals coming up above that petrol filling station. And you can see also some of these other buildings have consent for planning permission, but they haven't necessarily been built yet, but they've been added to the CGI, so you can appreciate some of the other developments which are planned to take place in the surrounding area. And then also the view from Thoresby Street, City Road, looking north. So whilst the site doesn't actually front onto City Road, it is in quite close proximity, and so the colonnade is sort of, you can see in the facades kind of orientate to the south facing, so that it provides it addresses that relationship with City Road as well as Thoresby Street. These are some of the visuals from Townscape Visual Impact Assessment. So the existing is on the left, and then the proposed is on the right. They're quite often wireline images. They're similar to the CGIs you've seen before. So in the wireline images, the green is the application proposal, and the brown is other consented developments in the surrounding area, the sort of cumulative impact of development that you can see. And this is a view from Wharf Road. So this is an existing listed building here, and you can see that the site will be going into in this area here. In here, and other developments taking place around. And then from Thoresby Street, and also from Windsor Terrace, and the junction of Thoresby Street and City Road again. So you can see side by side now existing, proposed. And then also from City Road again. I will stop the presentation there, and I'll just also draw members' attention to the addendum report. So as there have been a number of comments that have been submitted after the report was published and that have been forwarded to members, and we've collated those and summarised them in the addendum report. So they predominantly raise concerns which have already been addressed in the committee report, but there are some other sort of points that have been listed in the addendum report there in a little bit more detail. I would just clarify on the second point down there about Historic England, and have been approached about listing, and they've said that they don't want to list the building. The officer response is a little bit confusing. The site is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset. It's not on the council's local list, but it's a non-designated heritage asset, and conservation officer who's here will be able to explain that sort of issue in more detail, I'm sure, when if members have questions on that. The other points are all sort of as addressed really in the addendum report. There have been a couple of proposed changes to the conditions. We're proposing to add a condition, just to change the condition with regard to the operational management plan, to make clear that there's a draft plan that's been submitted, but will require a full plan to be submitted for approval. And then also we've added a condition requiring the development to be completed, the demolition phase and the development to take place as part of a single operation, so that there won't be any gap between the demolition and then leaving the site empty, because given that the proposals result in the loss of the existing building, it's something to be avoided. All other matters are as set up in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Maxwell, please.
Chair, sorry to, just before Councillor Maxwell begins, could I just check who will be keeping the time?
Oh yes,
for the
Graham.
speakers?
Graham here.
Is that okay, Graham?
Yeah, just give me a moment to set up. And I
Okay,
can do
thank
that.
you, Graham.
Okay, yep, I'm ready for that.
Yvonne, please. I think you're muted.
Can we start again as I was muted, please? Thanks.
I'm not sure. Go on.
Oh, go on, Vincent. Yeah, so I'd like to highlight the value of what we will lose with this proposed development and whether there is still demand for it. The Hackney Science Society has pointed out that the existing building is the last remnant of the Royal Chest Hospital and is to be regarded as an undesignated heritage asset. Substantial harm, they state, arises from its total loss, and they are not convinced that the proposed student accommodation justifies this harm. Shoreditch Conservation Area Advisory Committee strongly objects to the demolition of this heritage building, a rare survival in the area, the loss of which would cause irreparable harm. They state the proposed building is completely generic, lacks any architectural merit, and its disproportionate massing overpowers the streetscape. Officers themselves state it as a locally important institution. However, the officers say that the loss is outweighed by the benefits. There's mention of the community space being offered in the development, but we've got no details about what this means in practice. Will it be low cost? We'd like some more detail on that. And what has been done to build links into the community? We've seen the importance of stronger communities being built during COVID, young and old, those new to the area and those many years standing. Officers state that the site already provides student accommodation, so there will be no new impacts. But how can a larger building not impact on the area and its character? As you can see from the pictures, it's located within a valley. Yes, there are tall buildings, but the close surrounding buildings are generally 6 to 8 stories in scale. This building is set back and is in a more residential area. It's not bang on city roads. There are taller buildings on city roads, but this building is right next to the local residential estate blocks and their community spaces. The photos we're shown shows the skyline from a distance, but those towers that you see are not right next to the buildings. They're not impacting on them. Those tall buildings are at a distance. Buxton Court is on the edge of City Road with its tall buildings, but this would encroach onto the residential area and would be out of keeping. The photo taken from Windsor Terrace is quite misleading, as though the tall building was right behind. There's talk of a fence that will be erected to address overlooking impacts towards the playground, but that's not going to stop student rooms overlooking from higher up floors, not just to the playground, but to the residents. And how can 4 times the number of students not make new impacts or increased impacts? We are going from 33 students to 140 in a small residential area. They will increase in existing impacts that you're going to hear from the residents. This is not affordable accommodation for students who will be here for 3 years and be part of the community. It is for students who will only stay 4 months, passing through, highly unlikely to have an investment in the local community. And, why would they? The report says Arcadia will encourage students to consider local residents, but I hear examples where this does not happen at present, with only 33 students. It is not reassuring to residents who report antisocial behaviour already. To expect students coming for a short trip to experience London and live with other students, it's unlikely that this encouragement will work, and it doesn't at the moment. Nothing is being done to integrate 140 students or the building into the wider community. No links will be built. It's just more people separate from their environment and unlikely to be encouraged to be quiet and not cause disruption to what is a residential area, albeit being encroached more and more by developments with little being given back. Sorry. It is within a CA said zone, but what are the local and strategic need that outweighs losing this building? The demand for more accommodation stated by Arcadia was identified pre-COVID. There is no way of knowing if the demand will be the same now or in the future. And even if there is this the right space? Extra spaces. Is it still necessary provision as stated in the report? No one is able to say what our economy will be like in the next few years and what the demand will be for people coming from overseas, whether tourists or students. I'd ask the committee to not agree to demolishing this locally significant building on out-of-date evidence of a demand identified in a very different climate. The developers can always come back when it's clearer if there is demand, but once that building is knocked down, it is lost forever. It is demolished. I'd ask members to reject this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Maggie, please. Maggie, are you there? Ah, yes. You're muted, Maggie.
Yeah, can I start again?
Yes, go on.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm a resident of Buxton Court, and I've spoken to many other residents, all of whom strongly object to the proposed works, and they've asked me to speak on their behalf. Some of the objections are the height of the building, particularly, will cause extreme loss of light and heat in our gardens and our homes. Already, I have the electric light on most of the day. It'll lead to increased utility bills at a very bad time when people just can't afford to pay these things. There's lack of privacy for current residents because they'll be totally overlooked. Adverse effects on the play area are particularly a worry for the mums and the grandparents around here. There'll be no natural light hardly in the playground, and it's a potential danger to children because we don't know who's going to be coming and going, and they're there for such a short time. So the play area is already being used by students in the early hours of the morning, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, playing football and talking loudly, laughing. And because of the transient nature of the Thoresby House residents, asking them to desist is just a waste of time. They don't take any notice. So an increase of food waste will probably happen because we're already got a problem because of the close proximity to McDonald's. We've got big vermin problems around here: rats, mice, squirrels, foxes, pigeons. This is likely to increase, and there'll be a huge increase in noise nuisance from parties, barbecues, loud music, and groups gathering in and around the premises. We've had problems with students having barbecues in the play area as well. And there's just worries about heavier traffic leading to air pollution, greater air pollution, and all of our residents are extremely concerned about the erection of a 12-story building right beside where we live. So it's going to block, as I say, the light and the heat. We just can't conceive what it would be like. And people are panicking now. They're really upset, and they're panicking that this is going to maybe take place. So I would ask you I would ask the committee to consider our strong opinions and very valid objections, and to decline this planning application, please. Thank you.
That's halfway through.
Hi there, I'm going to butt in now. Hi, my name is Dr. Frederick Clough. I'm a resident of... Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm a resident, my name's Dr. Fred Clough. I'm a resident of Buxton Court. I communicate regularly with several of the elderly and vulnerable members on the estate who have asked me to voice some of their concerns. In canvassing views, I spoke to over 90 individuals across the Buxton, Micawber and Wellesley Terrace and received unanimous opposition to the proposed demolition and the rebuild of the 12-storey building, including a signed petition of over 40 households which have been provided to you all. The opposition to this project echoes much of what Maggie's communicated concerning noise, nuisance and loss of local amenities, including the light obstruction and or overshadowing of adjoining structures. Residents communicated to me that there's been ongoing behavioural issues reported both police and ASB officers at the council related to the guests at Thoresby House, and also that residents who have contacted Arcadia themselves to ask them to appropriately police the antisocial behaviour were often not given an adequate response. These are the magnitude of existing problems with only 35 short-term tenants and would therefore only be exacerbated by increasing capacity fourfold. Additional points to raise include the historic relevance and significance, which I believe the councillor has touched on. One resident, I believe, forwarded you all a copy of the 2017 council report, so I would suggest that you all would be grateful if you could all read that post meeting. There are also noteworthy concerns about the nature of a 12-story mid-rise build at this location. Not only would it not be in keeping with surrounding buildings, which are all 4-story maximum and within a few meters, it would also cause overshadowing, particularly impacting the adjacent garden area and green space, such as the children's playground. But also on the site itself, there's a courtyard, and in the proposed plans, there's felling of trees, which I understand may be considered as greenfield site. So I would urge you to explore that. And furthermore, there's also concerns around the wind tunnel effect, which may arise from a further mid-rise or high-rise building. This is something which has been a large issue in the area, with winds sometimes up to 30 to 50 kilometers an hour, impacting on
5 minutes.
With pollution coming from the very close by City Road being a particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, applicant, please.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Russell Peplow from Arcadia University. Arcadia University started out as a school to teach liberal arts to young women in Pennsylvania in 1853, and at a time when there were a few higher education institutions open to young women in the US. By 1872, the school had gained collegiate status and was known as Beaver College, and in 2001, the school attained university status, and the Board of Trustees approved the decision to change the name of Beaver College to Arcadia University. Today, although we are a small private not-for-profit university, we are leaders in the US in study abroad, and we have been pioneers in international education. We have more than 2,500 undergraduates and 1,400 graduate students enrolled at Arcadia in more than 65 fields of study. Study abroad for Arcadia in the UK can be said to have started when, in 1948, one of our professors took 17 female students via boat to Europe for 10 weeks to see firsthand the economic effects of the Second World War and the post-war efforts to rebuild. In 1965, we established the Centre for Education Abroad so American undergraduates could study for academic credit in fully integrated programs in Great Britain, Austria, and elsewhere. At this time, we established our London Centre. Over the years, we've expanded our curricular offerings and locations. Last year, nearly 3,000 students from over 300 US colleges and universities studied abroad with us. In London, we operate a teaching facility in Bloomsbury for our own instruction, and additionally have students studying and living on campuses with City University, Goldsmiths, LSE, Queen Mary, SOAS, UCL, and Westminster. Increasingly, and particularly with regard to City University, we find our UK partners unable to guarantee accommodation for our students. We have owned and housed students at Thoresby House since the late 1990s, and during this time we have explored a number of options to improve the standard of accommodation and extend the existing building to better meet the needs of our students and staff. Key issues with the building for us have been with the existing building include a lack of disabled access, the small and varying room sizes, a lack of communal space and shared facilities for students, and the poor energy efficiency. All of the options we reviewed were found to be financially unviable. So in 2016, we started the pre-application discussions with your officers to explore options for the redevelopment of the site. During the 3 years, we've discussed during the 3 years of discussions that followed, the height of the building was reduced significantly. The layout and architecture was amended and refined in response to comments from the design review panel and officers. The university therefore feels that the scheme before you tonight is of the highest architectural quality and will provide our students and staff with well-designed, safe, accessible, and comfortable accommodation during their studies in London. The proposals will allow more of our students to continue to contribute to the local economy in the long term, and we are also keen to move the focus of our current community engagement projects led by our student services team to Thoresby House and the wider associated area. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is Adam Williams from CMA Planning. Just before we move on to the question and answers, I thought it'd be helpful if I did a brief response to some of the points raised by Councillor Maxwell, Mr. Gallen, and Mr. Clough. I understand that the matter of the loss of the existing building being a non-designated heritage asset has been raised as a concern. As Russell mentioned, the first set of options that were looked at were to retain the existing building, but it was shown to be unviable, which is why a little more than 3 years ago, we started discussions with your officers, including the Conservation Officer, on options for redevelopment. And it was felt, and as set out in the committee report, that the public benefits of the scheme, including various mitigation measures such as the retention of the foundation stone, retention of the original hospital gate, building recording, and the provision of a historical interpretive panel, including community benefits such as the provision of community space within the building, outweighed the harm of the loss of the non-designated heritage asset. There was an application to list the building earlier in the year, and English Heritage, Historic England now, did confirm that the building was not of sufficient architectural or historic value to warrant listing, citing the fact that the hospital has now been demolished there is no evidential and tangible link between that building and its original purpose, and the condition of the building and subsequent alterations having detracted from its architectural quality. In terms of questions around the community floor space and the benefit that will provide, the detail of how that will be secured would be in the section 106, but the intention is that will be provided for use by the community either for a certain number of days per year or through a booking system. We would be happy to work with your officers during the drafting of the section 106 to agree provisions that would be acceptable to the community and maximise the benefit of that space. In terms of the impact of the development on the playground, the daylight and sunlight assessment shows that the impact on the communal spaces within Buxton Court would be pretty much negligible. Both the main area of communal space and the playground would retain more than 85% of their existing sunlight availability, which is well above BRE guideline thresholds. In terms of increase on traffic, the proposed development would be car-free, and we wouldn't expect any of the students to be driving coming over from the States, and there is no parking provided. In terms of reports of disturbance from students currently on site, and we would be happy to answer any specific questions you have in questions and answers. One of the points to note is at the moment there are only 33 beds and there's limited on-site staff. There's one member of on-site staff who's working part-time, and therefore the ability to manage the students is limited by the size and nature of the accommodation that's there at the moment. The proposed development offers the opportunity to provide much more on-site staff, including a manned reception area that overlooks the ground floor space and the street, and provides a lobby and sufficient communal space to enable the students to have space to relax and within the site, whereas at the moment there isn't sufficient communal space for them, hence the need to venture out. Just to add as well, Julian Demetz from DMFK Architects is also here this evening and would be happy to answer any questions you have on design and architecture. And yeah, be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much indeed. If I could just kick off, first of all, is Tim Walder there? Tim, you around? Are you the?
Yes, I'm here.
Tim, could you tell us about the I guess the status of locally listed non-designated heritage and the balance that you guys have drawn to come to this conclusion, please, and yeah, tell me the story about why we're relinquishing this building.
Yeah, there's a little bit of slight confusion in the report. The National Planning Policy Framework has a category of heritage building called a non-designated heritage asset, which is something which the local authority would identify. There's been some talk about locally listed buildings. This is not a locally listed building. It's actually an academic question. Locally listed buildings are a subset of non-designated heritage assets. So the fact that it's not locally listed is neither here nor there. essentially what happened was when we were approached at pre-app, which was a pre-app that I dealt with, we became aware it was this basically a funny little building, and we didn't know what it was. And obviously it's working as student housing, but we couldn't really explain what the character of the building was. The applicants did a heritage statement as part of their pre-app, and there is a heritage statement as part of the application. And that revealed what I wouldn't have guessed, which it's a remnant of the Royal Chest Hospital, not to be confused with the London Chest Hospital, which is a listed building in Tower Hamlets. And that hospital occupied the site to the south where Buxton Court basically now is. And the building was there from about 1850. If members are interested, the history of the building is in the report, summarised at paragraph 6.3.18. And essentially this hospital was a chest hospital along with several others nearby, and there's quite a lot of hospitals in this area, and it was really badly damaged by bombing in the war. And so in 1954 it was knocked down and the Buxton Court estate was built essentially on its site, which explains why the building that remains is slightly strange, because it's a nurses' home from 1906 and it's got a very 1906 look to it. At the south side there's evidence that it was joined onto other buildings, and you can sort of see that on the north and the east sides as well. So it has a slightly strange appearance on three sides where other buildings formerly butted up against it. So it didn't originally have this sort of standalone character that it now has. So earlier on in the pre-application, we did identify it as a non-designated heritage asset because of the history and the character of the building. Essentially, the judgment that members need to make on advice from officers is in relation to NPPF paragraph 197, and that is quoted verbatim at paragraph 6.3.27 of the officer's report, which is basically that when you're dealing with a non-designated heritage asset, there's not these tests of less than substantial or substantial harm. It's a test of balancing the impact of the proposals on the asset against the wider planning benefits of the scheme. A balanced judgment will be required having regard to the scale of any harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. So obviously in this case the harm is more or less absolute. There is a bit of mitigation which I'll come to. The significance is arguably not terribly high. It is a non-designated heritage asset. And the judgment was made by planning officers that the planning benefits of the scheme more widely outweighed the loss of the building. There is mitigation in various conditions. One is that the building will be recorded prior to demolition, and the recording of the building, photographic and textual, would be sent to the Greater London Historic Environment Record and Hackney Archives, so there would be a record of the building. There's also a condition requiring retention of the 1886 foundation stone of the hospital which was bombed, which somehow survived the bombing and the demolition, another memorial stone, and a hospital gate, which is one of the sort of few surviving bits of the actual hospital itself, which is a wrought iron gate from just to the south. And they probably would be on display in the foyer of the proposed new building, along with an interpretive panel which would show images of the building which previously existed, and explain some of the kind of quite interesting history of the adjacent site. I mean, the question about the balance, Vincent, is essentially...
That's why I'm going to move on to ask Steve.
Yeah.
So Steve, can you tell us how you balance this lot out, please?
So in terms of the sort of, the balance against the loss of the heritage asset, there are some urban design benefits in terms of the new development. You've got the existing building which previously formed part of a group, and now it's on its own, so it has those sort of big blank flank elevations which don't contribute that well to the street scene in certain views. The new building, the new building responds to that. It's got sort of active frontages on all sides. Also, the area is changing significantly as well, and that there's been a lot of new development along City Road and City Road Basin, and we feel that a proposed development, being the scale that it is, mitigates well between the some of these other taller buildings around City Road Basin and the lower scale of the Buxton Court estate. The proposals, they also provide, the existing building isn't really fit for purpose for its current use. The new building provides a greater quantity of fit for purpose student accommodation and makes more efficient use of the site, which is in the central activity zone, close proximity to public transport and so on. So that planning policies are looking to make more of these kind of locations, and so that they can contribute to the city economy more strongly and meet needs. Also, the development proposals do include other sort of benefits in terms of there's a public realm contribution for improvements to nearby public space, and a number of other sort of transport. There's other transport related contributions as well to mitigate from the transport impact. So I think, in general terms, we feel that this proposal does mean that the site it makes better, more efficient use of the site, given where it is in the in terms of sort of planning policies, and it also responds to the changed sort of urban context around it compared to the existing building.
Thank you. Before we move on from heritage, and I'll then ask other members to ask questions, is there anybody else who wants to pursue that point at all? I think we've had a pretty good response from officers. Okay, so Katie, have you got a question? You don't have to ask questions, but have you got a question, Katie?
Yes, I do. I mean, just to say, I've got no objection to the principle of students coming to London to study for a term. I mean, I think we need to divide actual material planning issues from the sort of from non-material issues that we're not allowed to take account of. The question for the officers, I guess, is, I mean, some of the objectors were saying that the increased footprint of the building means loss of green space or green field space, as opposed to presumably brownfield space. So if the officers could comment on that, I'd be grateful. And I'd also be grateful if we could look at the loss of light to Buxton Court and Buxton Court gardens, patios, and the play space. Because it's clear that there is loss of light, but the officers think that this is an acceptable amount of loss of light. I'd like to know a bit more about why they think that's an acceptable level of loss of light.
Thank you. Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So, in the first, sorry, could you I'm just going to deal with the loss of light aspect first, just whilst it's fresh to my mind. I'm just going to bring back the committee presentation, and so we can bring back some of the photos. So just going back to the photos of the sort of site surroundings.
If it helps, I was looking at paras 6.5.7 and the subsequent paras.
Okay, so so in the first sort of as set out in the committee report, the two blocks which are the most affected by the development. So you've got the 1 to 18 Buxton Court to the south and 19 to 42 to the north. So this is 19 to 42 Buxton Court. So you've got the application site here. So the development is kind of pretty much set back only a short distance from that site boundary. So the nearest potentially affected windows are these sort of windows here in the flank elevation, and so they will experience noticeable loss of light, but they are secondary windows to other and to living rooms, and the living rooms do have other windows facing westward, so you can sort of see them just about on the side of the of the building there. So when you look at the daylight levels within those rooms in the in the whole, taking into account all the windows that provide daylight to those rooms, we feel that the sort of light levels are still a kind of reasonable amount of daylight given its location in quite a sort of dense urban context. The other windows under, here where the balconies are, there will be loss of light to these windows as well, but they're also impacted on by the balconies above. So and that kind of gives a sort of so when you're assessing it again in terms of the BRE guidelines, the impacts on windows when they have balconies above, that kind of looks worse in terms of the loss of light, but then they also have the benefit of the balconies themselves. So it's not always a sort of clear indication. The other windows, further from the site, so they're less affected. Turning now to 1 to 42 Buxton Court. This property, this block, has mainly kitchens and some bedrooms, and also sort of where that bit sticks out is a stairwell, and also they're sort of on two levels of flats, but they have generally kitchens and bedroom windows facing the application site, but they also have most of their orientation is to the south. If you go back here, we can see the south elevation of this block. So this is where most of the living rooms and other bedrooms are, facing in this direction. So they'll be unaffected by the development. So when you're looking at that sort of potentially affected windows on the west end of this block, they will suffer some loss of daylight. However, they're generally to smaller kitchen rooms where the expectation is that you wouldn't necessarily have the same level as daylight as main living rooms and things like that. And so you've also got some impacts from this kind of overhanging sort of floor above as well. So when we take into account these factors, plus its urban context, we feel that the kind of impacts in terms of daylight and sunlight are sort of they're not unreasonable given the circumstances of the buildings that are affected and their surroundings. The other point in terms of the sort of greenfield brownfield development, the whole site is considered to be previously developed, and there are planning policy does encourage development on previously developed land, and especially in locations like this which are highly accessible. There are trees on the site that would be lost, but then there would also be some new tree planting. If we look at the proposals, will be some replacement tree planting along the sort of southern elevation. Does that respond to the question?
Thank you. Susan, next.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Couple of questions. My first question is just I want to go back to the comment made by Hackney Society in 4.41 around the ground and first floor element of the development. Said they're poor and functional in appearance and negative. If Steve can comment on that, but linking that to this plinth, can you please say something from what the objector said about this plinth on the second story? Sorry, where is mine?
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I haven't finished. I couldn't find my mark. Oh, the other thing, Councillor Maxwell mentioned the linking to the community. I don't have any issue if this is a student accommodation that is purposely built for American students, according to this submission. but I want to find out in terms of linking to the community. There was this mention that the teaching space will remain available as a community space or in perpetuity. And I just want to find out, will it be possible for other people in the community to use that space? Or when you're referring to community space, you are just talking about the student that will be using that, or will any or resident around the place be able to use that space? Thank you.
Steve, please.
It might be best if Connor is the urban design officer who's worked on this. He may be best placed to respond to the sort of questions about the architecture and the ground floor and mezzanine.
Connor?
Yeah, I can come to.
You understand the Hackney Society issue first of all, because if you could explain it to us first, and then say why you think things are okay, if you do.
So they've commented that they have a concern about the ground and first floor not being of sufficient kind of architectural quality. So we would, obviously as it is a taller building, we would look at LP33 and the tall buildings policy, which talks about taller buildings needing to have to enhance the streetscape at ground level, and we consider that the kind of strategic moves at ground level, such as setting it back from the building line, introducing this colonnade, which actually serves to widen the public footway, serves to enhance that kind of public streetscape. I think also some work went in kind of after pre-app at design review panel actually came up, the link between the ground floor and the mezzanine being kind of maybe disconnected, but we work together with the applicant to basically work on that connection. So there's a new kind of, in the proposals you're seeing today, that stair that connects the ground and mezzanine floor is kind of expressed and visible. And yeah, that colonnade kind of opens up. So when you come from City Road up Thoresby Street, you're kind of welcomed into the building. So yeah, I hope that explains.
So you're comfortable with it, are you?
You're happy with it? Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Pello, can you tell us what your offer is in terms of this community teaching space, and I'll ask Steve later how we're going to secure that.
Thank you. The community, or the space being available to the community on the mezzanine level at the back of the building we worked with post the pre-app, the initial pre-app meetings, and then actually after the design review panel, and as Connor referenced, changing the stair access. And what we've tried to do is create a space that is accessible, that we can control access, that doesn't allow access into the residential part, so we can provide it to the wider community, not just the community who live within the building. As I think I mentioned at the beginning of my sort of preamble about the university, as a not-for-profit entity, we would make the space available at cost to any sort of local community party who were wanting to use the space, and sort of an approximation aligned with sort of our educational aspirations, I guess, or sort of wider community engagement stuff. Currently, we house a number of students, or the majority of our students are housed away from Thoresby House in a building in Highgate, and most of our community activities are focused around that larger population, in both working with entities like the Older People's Project in Kentish Town, working with the Dragon Hall project down in Bloomsbury near housing. And what we would be looking to do would be to shift our focus of our sort of student service teams led community engagement and sort of volunteering process with the community more around the Thoresby House area.
Thank you. And Steve, what are we going to secure in turn? How we're going to do this? Is it 2 hours a day, or what's the deal?
Well, at the moment, so we've in the addendum, I've recommended some changes to the operational management plan, so we could require details of how the space is booked and when it's going to be available to be submitted as part of the operational management plan. We could. I think there's also mention in the head of term within the Section 106 agreement to secure it as well.
So we don't know the scale of it yet.
So yeah, I mean, we don't have sort of amounts, I suppose, a set hours or anything like that. No.
Might ask that to come back then, Mr. Pellow.
I guess our assumptions have been that this will be more. Our assumption has been that this is more likely to be sort of evenings and weekend space, as we may be using the space during the daytime and sort of teaching space.
Okay, we'll try and come back to that. Okay, that was Susan's.
No, Chair, I've got another. Okay, I just want Steve to comment on his dismissal or in terms of LP 33 and LP 20, where it stated that a proposal for student accommodation there must be a demonstration that the site is not suitable for conventional self-contained or residential units. And in this comment, the officers have actually said that that a policy is not relevant on this occasion. So I don't really understand. Are you saying that because he's already at the moment it's a current hostel? Is that so? Please, can you say something about that?
Yeah, I think that aspect of policy LP20 is really, if we were looking at a proposal for student housing on a site that was currently in another use, for instance, it was a cleared site, or it was a light industrial building or something like that, and we're looking at a development, an application for student housing, we would then be looking at the principle of that use on that site and whether it would be more appropriate to be used for residential. But in this case, because it's an existing, it's currently it's owned by a university, it's used as student accommodation. That's the current use on the site. So there's no prospect of it being used for residential purposes because it's already used as student accommodation. So we just don't feel that that's really something that the proposal needs to be assessed against. I think there is going to be an increase in the numbers of students, so there will be a greater, there's going to be a greater impact in terms of the things that you get from students and comings and goings, and whether it's potential for noise and disturbance and things like, and just in general activity is. Yes, that will, that's something we need to assess as part of this application, but we just don't think we need to assess the suitability of the site for student accommodation given how it's used already.
Thank you. Brian.
I think the only thing I would have raised would have been the sheer height of the building compared to the ones that are next to it.
Okay, Connor, can you respond to the height issue, please?
Yeah, so I think as Steve kind of outlined in his introductory presentation, the site finds itself in this valley between kind of the cluster of quite tall buildings on Islington side by the basin and other taller buildings towards the other end of City Road. This particular site finds itself kind of quite close to that tall cluster of in Islington on the basin, but I think we consider that the scale and form of the building, and because it's of such a high quality, the principle of a building of this size, which is 11 stories with a setback 12th story, is acceptable. That was something as well that just in the way, I guess, to explain how it mediates between the kind of low-level horizontal slabs of Buxton Court with the kind of point block that mediates between that larger cluster and the scale of Buxton Court. It's also worth noting that the design review panel, when it came to the design review panel, that was another kind of consideration that they kind of concluded, was that because they did have some concerns about the elevational treatment and kind of the layout when it went to design review panel in August 2019, but they were happy that should the architecture improve in its quality, which we consider it has, that they are kind of comfortable with that level of kind of scale and massing.
Thank you. Claire, please. No questions, Claire? That's...
Claire, you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, took me a while. I've got, I suppose, a couple of comments stroke questions. My first is about the residents' worry about the existing antisocial behaviour and how that's going to significantly increase with 4 times as much students. Now, I know you did talk about you've only got a part-time member of staff, and you are going to have some more staff present, but it'd be good to have a bit more detail about how you're going to plan, to ensure that these issues are addressed quickly and don't carry on being an issue. I mean, we don't want footballs kicked around at 3 or 4 in the morning for nearby residents who are getting up and going to school and work at 7 o'clock. So Russell, I don't know whether you could answer that question, and then I'll come back with number 2, please.
Can I just ask Steve first, the scope?
Oh, sorry, Steve.
Scope for us to deal with ASB in the planning process, and then I guess we will ask for a comment from Russell. Will that be okay, Claire?
Yeah, thank you.
Steve, please.
Well, I guess it is a mixed use. So the surrounding area does have a sort of range of uses, and so there will be some activity from different types of uses. I think our best scope is through the management plan, the operational management plan, to sort of set in place a series of clear procedures that try to manage it to the best that we can, and also so that there's. I'm sure Russell will be able to talk about that a bit more. But it's sort of clear about what things can be done. I mean, there are also other controls under other legislation. So, for instance, environmental health in terms of noise, nuisance, and things like that. So it's not sort of solely a planning issue really. But with through the management plan, there is some scope to try to sort of do things to the best we can.
Mr. Sepler.
Yeah, I think one of the big advantages that we see from the new development is the ability for the building to allow the students to actually be better managed. The management plan addresses that in that we would have more staff on site at the other site where we currently operate, where we have a larger number of students, more in comparison, similar in number to the number we will be looking to house here. We have night security. We have 3 resident staff who live on site there. With the design of the building allows for a larger number of resident staff to be living on site, and so they will then be more present for the students. The redesign of the design of the ground floor and the lobby area means that instead of students congregating on the outside of the building as they enter and leave the building, there is space now for them to congregate inside the building, which would keep that sort of noise or any disturbance of comings and going actually inside the building. There will also be that staff desk right at the front of the building where the point of entry and exit is, so they'll be able to manage and see what's going on in the building and help students, support students, help address any sort of local or antisocial behaviour that's going on in the near vicinity. I think that's that's another one of our sort of ongoing concerns with the building, has been the challenges we've had with the activity that goes on late at night around McDonald's and the petrol station, and that's been a challenge for the students who've been resident in the building as well. And so having staff on site who are facing out and very visible at that place, I think we're hoping will make that space safer for us, but for all of the residents as well in the local area. And so that's really what we're looking to try and improve for both ourselves and for the students who are living there, as well as for the local neighbours in the building.
Okay, thank you. And Steve, is this going to be a legal agreement? So if the property moves on, then the obligation will still be there in terms of the concierge or whatever, the staff?
It's currently proposed as a planning condition, so it will be enforceable even if there's a change of owner and operator.
Okay, thank you. Claire, you had another question.
Yeah. I've been very concerned for quite a few years that a lot of buildings do not perform as well as they say they are going to do when at the planning and design stage. So I very much welcome the fact that we're going to have energy post-occupancy energy performance, and I just wondered whether I could ask either our officers or the developer to give a little bit more detail of how you will do that. Is it just simply monitoring temperature and relative humidity and doing a kind of post survey with residents, or what's the kind of level of detail? Are you going to be looking at energy bills, demand? Can you give a bit more detail of how you're going to monitor your building?
Steve, is that you still? Or have you got a colleague here?
It's me. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the sort of certification, so it will be a BREEAM excellent development. So there's a requirement for it to be assessed by an assessor, and the applicants to submit a report to confirm that after it's been post occupancy, which is sort of referenced in the report. Perhaps the applicants might want to talk a little bit more about their sort of aspirations in terms of sustainability.
Do we have the architect, or is that you, Mr. Peplow?
Any of us could answer, Adam or myself.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer. So yes, I mean, one of the key core elements of the brief for the site was to ensure that we were delivering a building that was maximising energy efficiency, sustainable design and construction, modern methods of construction. The scheme includes a number of active and passive measures to try and reduce energy consumption and CO2 emissions. The scheme has also been designed to enable future connection to a district heat network should one become available, and includes a number of renewable energy technologies, including air source heat pumps and photovoltaic panels on the roof. The scheme will perform very well. It will achieve 69% reductions in building regulations baseline, and then the shortfall to zero carbon would be met with the carbon offset payment.
Could I possibly add to that? Sorry, Julian Demetz, architect. We've been working with Arcadia for nearly 4 years now, and an exemplary client. And as architects, we're pushing for our clients to procure their buildings in the correct way to avoid poor delivery. And I think I've got pretty convinced that Arcadia understand the value of that, and also to push them into commission post-occupancy evaluation, which is, I totally agree with Councillor Potter that is absolutely where the way that we're going to secure buildings in the future that are actually performing the way we say they're going to perform. So we would be pushing Arcadia to undertake this process to evaluate the performance of the building, which is designed as a very high performing building, extremely well insulated. It's got a blue roof, biodiverse roof, very high performing windows, and an extremely sophisticated ventilation system, but with opening windows as well, and a whole host of other elements. But yes, post occupancy evaluation.
Good. So hope we can take that on and do that more widely. We've got Mr. Peplow first, then Claire. I'll get you back to you.
Sorry, I was going to just say, from our point of view, we have obviously an inherent interest in not just building a building that meets requirements, but actually benefiting from those requirements in the longer term, as the intending to occupy the building. We're not a developer as such who are then looking for somebody else to then occupy our building. So we are hoping that we are pushing for all of these briefs to actually fulfil requirements for us in the future. And certainly that's one of the active parts of where we're hoping to get to.
Thank you, Claire.
I was hoping for a little bit of detail of how you would be carrying out the annual, assessment. I suppose that's where I was coming. Maybe you haven't thought of that detail yet, but it does imply that you're going to be doing an annual energy, assessment. So I'm presuming you have got some idea of what you're going to assess. So, it was good to hear about the detail of the scheme, and I appreciate, it has been designed to a really good sustainability spec, but I'd really like to hear the detail about how you're going to meet those annual assessments, so that we can see that it means something.
Mr. Peplow, can you answer?
In all honesty, we don't have that in place at the moment, but we would certainly be happy to have that.
I'm going to be suggesting that they come back at a later stage with the operation management plan, the community facility issues. We can add on that post-occupancy checks or whatever plan, so they'll make them think about it before they get all the permissions in place. Is that okay?
I could probably just add a little bit more to that, and that is there will be a BMS and some very sophisticated metering in a building of this nature, just as part of the building management system. So there's data that's being collected on a daily basis rather than a yearly basis, and that will be it's up to us to respond if there's a requirement for post-occupancy evaluation, which we would support, to come up with a plan for how that's evaluated and taken into that report. But there's a lot of data being gathered on a daily basis because of the sophistication of the building.
Thank you. Steve.
Councillor Steve.
Councillor Steve, sorry.
Right, that's all right. Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions/points, if you wouldn't mind. The first is around, just circling back to the lighting. I saw a resident furiously shaking her head. I think it was Maggie who spoke at the beginning. So could I just, Chair, ask the objector what her objection was to the conversation around sunlight?
Sorry. Yeah, we will lose a significant amount of natural light in our homes and gardens, which means we'll lose heat as well, natural heat. The bills are going to go up. I mean, I already, with the tall buildings, I have my light on quite a lot during the day. It's going to be, we'll have no sunlight from about, we'll only have sunlight for about 2 or 3 hours a day once if this building goes up. And there's a play area there, which is going to be very dark for the children to play and quite dangerous. That's really it. And we're very, very concerned. We're actually panicking that this is going to go ahead, because none of us wants it, and none of us likes the idea of this great tall building blocking our light and heat and, take over our space. So, yeah, that's it, really.
Thank you.
You want to ask Steve any more for clarification at all as to?
Yeah, sorry, Adam is gesturing who wants to come in on that point. Chair, I don't know whether
you want to ask him.
Go on, Adam Williams. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So I thought I saw, when Steve was flicking through the addendum to his presentation, I saw the sun on the ground plans from the daylight sunlight assessment. So the effect on all the communal areas.
Sorry to interrupt you, Adam. Shall I just bring that up now so we can see?
Yeah, if you could, thank you.
Thanks. So, can't quite read the figures. I've got a note that the 2 main communal spaces, the test is whether for amenity spaces, is the amount of space that receives 2 hours of sun on the 21st of March, which is the spring solstice. And the BRE guidance says that at least 50% of a space should receive 2 hours of sun on that date to be adequately lit. Reductions below that level will be noticeable. Both the main communal spaces, including the playground, are well above the BRE guideline levels, with I think somewhere between 85 and 92% of the spaces continuing to receive over 2 hours of sun in March, and even more during the summer months. And also 16 out of the 18 private amenity spaces are also fully BRE compliant. And the two that fall below, it actually can be seen from the assessment that the main reason they're failing is that the buildings from the Buxton Court estate themselves are called the principal cause for overshadowing to those spaces, as set out in the committee report.
Okay, Steve, any more?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. My main concern is around the height, and I just wanted to talk to Connor, I think, is in charge of the height, isn't he? During your explanation, you sort of referenced the stepping down and talking about the high rise buildings. But I mean, it's fair to say that the high-rise buildings in the basin and further down towards Old Street are much further away than the residential buildings that are immediately next to. And I'm not entirely clear how we are sort of referencing the policy around taller buildings 50% higher than the 4 and the 6 story buildings that are directly adjacent to this proposal, given that's policy. So I'm a bit confused. If you could sort of set that out, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So, oh, there's a reverb, I think. But can everyone hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a tall building, as you say, and I think kind of building on what I said earlier, the scale, form, and massing is considered to be appropriate, I guess. LP33, the policy relates to tall buildings, kind of asks for the building to have a legible and coherent role in the wider context, and I think both in relation to the wider context being City Road, which is obviously kind of a developing character, but there are buildings to the south of City Road that are much taller in height than those at Buxton Court. But we also feel that consider that the whilst it is obviously a tall building, quite close to lower rise buildings, this isn't something that is uncommon in an urban environment, and we believe that because of that kind of legible and coherent kind of role it plays, I think its proximity towards City Road, although it's not right on City Road, it does address City Road in many ways because of its kind of placement directly in front of a very low-rise building, and again, I guess the tall buildings policy in LP33 really specifies that they'll only be considered acceptable should the design quality be really high, and we believe that the architecture of the scheme is of a very high quality. Yeah, does that?
Can I just, sorry, so within the wider context, so by that presumably you're meaning slightly further away,
yes.
It's within policy, but what's the policy around the immediate context, which is the lower rise buildings?
Yeah, so it does have to have an important So actually, yeah, sorry about that. The LP33, policy LP2, taller buildings, it does have to relate and respond to its immediate and wider surrounding context. So I guess it kind of goes back to the point about the ground floor condition in the base of the building, improving the immediate context of the streetscape through the kind of widened public realm on that side, and also that the materiality is of a high quality, which we consider it is. And as I said, I think in relation to how it relates with next to Buxton Court, which has these kind of horizontal blocks, actually to have this counter element that is taller in scale and height, but it's not uncommon in these kind of developments in urban conditions. The architects might want to add something to that, because I know that it was a key kind of driving consideration in their design process. And yeah.
Yeah, I think, unless my daughter comes running in a moment. The height of the building was discussed at DRP at quite some length in relation, as Connor said, to the elevational design. And actually the height of the building it's not how many stories can we get, it was about can we produce a building that's of a correct proportion. And there was quite a lot of studying of lower buildings to see how that related to a building of that footprint. So the decision to make it this particular height is a lot to do with how it works within the design of the elevation itself. And then the other point I think that Connor's made, I think is well made, is that there are many examples of slab ground scraping type buildings that are adjacent to counterpoint towers. If you take Trellick Tower, and if you take the Barbican, they all have counterpoint towers relative to lower rise context. So in the context of that sort of thinking, it doesn't necessarily follow that every new building in that area has to relate exactly to the ones next to it. The DRP pushed us very hard on design quality. There's loads of references and care that's gone into the elevation of this building to try and reference the original building that was there, and also the sort of memory of the Chest Hospital. And so as a package, we think that it's something we've really responded to the points that the DRP have made, and that the height of the building is correct for the proportions of the elevations, and that's where it's come from. It's not really about sticking extra floors on, and actually when you cut a couple of floors off, it loses something and it feels quite kind of stubby.
Thank you.
Okay.
Steve, more?
Just one final question. I think this one is for Steve, actually. It's around the designation of it being student accommodations. I mean, am I right in thinking that it's being used for student accommodation at the moment, but that's not particularly sort of designated? It's just being used, owned by a university. It's used for student accommodation. Is that right?
Yeah, so its current use is as student accommodation. Yeah. I mean, it is in the London Plan Central Activity Zone, where student accommodation is a kind of appropriate sort of use in that location as well.
But am I right in, when I read through the report, the new building will be student accommodation in perpetuity, won't it? We're putting that into
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so currently the Section 106 requires that it's going to be used as student accommodation only as part of Arcadia University, and not, so there won't be any other sort of students from other institutions staying there. I mean, in the situation where it did change and there would be, the site was sold to another, student education provider. There are sort of references to that in the committee report in terms of the sort of cycle parking and things like that. So how it work and things. But
I think my point is probably the opposite one, actually, which is we're going from a building which is not designated as student accommodation. It happens to be used as student accommodation, and then the new building will be protected and designated as student accommodation. And sorry, Natalie is speaking ahead.
Yeah, the existing use is student accommodation, surely, if it's been there for 20 years.
The established use classes for the established uses for student accommodation, isn't it, Steve? So it's not, we don't tend to allocate through a local planned student accommodation. So the circumstances won't change with the issue of this permission. So the lawful use is for student accommodation at the moment. And if this permission is implemented, then the use will still be for student accommodation. So there's no kind of land use designation. We wouldn't normally have a identity.
No, I suppose that's not the point I'm making. I mean, we're just having the point that I was making to Steve, the building could be used for other, or the land could be used for other uses at the moment.
Not necessarily, no. That would be the use at the moment. So
have to change the use as well.
You'd have to apply for a change of use if you were.
Yeah. Okay. And you would be able to apply for change of use from the new building.
Any point in time, you could apply for a new planning application for the change of use. Yeah.
Okay. So I think my point is really that it feels like we're moving from a situation where the building is currently used as student accommodation through use rather than through design. We're moving into a situation where the building will be designed for student accommodation, and we're going to put that in section 106. And so my question is, really, on the basis of that, it doesn't feel like just because it's being used at the moment, we should necessarily just be saying that it should always be used for student accommodation. It should be designated as such in this scenario. It does change the use, doesn't it? I mean, I don't really accept the argument that Steve was making, that it will always be, it should be, we don't need to consider the use of the land or the building for other uses because it's currently used for student accommodation. The new building will be designed as such and will be in the section 106.
Sorry, can I just
lost people.
Established use on the site, Stephen, is a student use, student accommodation use.
Yeah.
The applicant is coming forward with another student use. So the ability to resist that is near zero. If they had decided that they wanted to build bungalows on the site or something else, then they would have had to make the case for those changes, along with the architecture and all the other issues that they would have had to make the case for.
Could I also point out that the building was constructed as a nurses' hostel, which is basically the same planning use class as a student residential accommodation. So it's basically, and of course there was no town planning laws in 1906. So, but that is the lawful and fully established use, and the council can do nothing to change that.
I don't think that's certainly not the point I'm making about. Yeah, that's not the point I'm making. I think. Say again. Sorry.
And it was designed as a nurses' hostel in 1906. That's what it's designed for. So it's remaining within the use it was originally designed for.
Yeah, I think I'm talking about to Steve's original point. I think if we would think that this was an appropriate place to put student accommodation, had there not been student accommodation there as the central activities zone, is that you made that point at the beginning? I think, Steve.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in terms of LP20, when you're assessing the proposal, the LP20 is the most relevant policy in terms of assessing acceptability of student accommodation. But we just don't feel that first criteria point is something that's worth assessing against, really, because it's currently in use as student accommodation. There's no prospect of it being used for an alternative use. The proposal is for the same use as what it currently is used for.
Okay, that's everything from me. Thank you.
Katie, you have one, and I'll hopefully sum up after this.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I do agree with the officers that the resisting this on the basis of student accommodation when that's the established use is not a runner. I think the grounds on which this could potentially be refused are actually to do with the loss of the non-designated heritage asset. I have had a quick look at MPPF 197, which is, as Tim said, set out in the report, and it says the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account. In weighing applications that directly or indirectly affect non-designated heritage assets, a balanced judgment will be required. Well, this involves the destruction of a non-designated heritage asset. So I think that's about as big an effect as you can have. So, I mean, I think the question for the committee is, do we think the benefits of the scheme outweigh the loss of the non-designated heritage assets? I think that is the core question for us, not could we resist this because we don't think we need any more student accommodation. And I'm not completely convinced that the benefits do outweigh the loss of the asset personally.
Steve, can I don't know if you want to comment on that, or I mean, it's a comment, not a question, isn't it, Katie?
Yes, I guess it is.
Okay, Steve, you've got something at paragraph 8.136 in the addendum, and it links the because we don't want to. I mean, as I understood it, this site could be demolished tomorrow because it's not protected from demolition by conservation area or any other. Yet you seemingly have linked this to the demolition to the building of this development, which you think, to answer Katie's point, is a good response to the site. I wonder how you've managed to make that link, and how is it possible to insist that both things happen, demolition and rebuild?
So yeah, sorry. Okay, well, the proposed condition in the addendum is really to do with actually the following paragraph in the NPPF. So I think what it might be quite good is if I just bring up the NPPF now, just a moment. Can everyone see?
Loading up, yes.
Yeah. So this is the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework. So so you've got paragraph 197, which sets out the assessment we need to make here in terms of the non-designated heritage asset and the balanced sort of judgment. That the proposed planning condition was aimed really at paragraph 1.98, which is just the one below, where it says local planning authorities should not permit the loss of the whole or part of the heritage asset without taking all reasonable steps to ensure the new development will proceed after the loss has occurred. So that condition is really just us trying to make sure that the development does proceed if the existing building is demolished.
Okay, thank you. If I can sum up my thoughts on this. In terms of student numbers and students, in some ways we are providing accommodation for students, and if we don't provide accommodation for students, they will go and live in 3-bedroom terrace houses or council estates or what have you. So it does make a contribution towards our overall requirement for accommodation. I've been down and had a look at the footprint of the site and the light issues, and it's clear that the description that we've had this evening in terms of the main living rooms, etc., do look out from the other side of the development or are at some distance away, and I was comfortable with that. The height, I think, the Buxton Court is probably the unusual bit in terms of the height in that area. One can see how things are developing. The heritage issues, I think it is sad that we are losing that, but the undesignated nature of this development means the protection is not strong. We would have to have a very strong reason to think that that's viable to try and resist the loss of that building. ASB is not really a planning issue, but we can do something, and I'm going to suggest that we do bring back that operational management plan. We bring back the community facility plan, whatever that is, and Claire's post-occupancy thing. We might as well see that at the same time if we could. So that's my thoughts on this. So does anybody have any final questions? Anybody? Okay, so we know what we're about. What I'm going to do is ask you to vote, and then I'm going to ask you to keep your hand up, so we'll all vote at the same time or not. Keep your hand up, and then I'll do
Chair,
a
sorry, Chair, I just wanted to just to double check. I know that Councillor Snell has contacted me about this, but obviously Councillor Snell joined after item 5.
Yes, he can't vote.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for confirming. Thank you.
So the recommendation is to grant conditional plan permission subject to completion of the legal agreement. All those in favour, please show. So, Vincent is in favour. Brian?
In favour.
Claire?
In favour.
Susan?
In favour.
Thank you. Are there any against? Steve? Again?
Against.
Any abstentions, please?
You didn't ask me, Chair.
Oh, I can't see your hand.
Oh, sorry, no. Well, I was waiting for you to call. Again.
Okay. Katie is against. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Some of us will look forward to seeing the building. Thank you very much indeed. Well, now, do we want 5 minutes break?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
10 past, we'll come up at 15 minutes past.
Sorry, Chair. Just to, Gary, just to let you know that I'll be logging off.
Okay.
At this end.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. 5 minutes.
I'm not sure if, sorry, everybody, Rob Isaacs and Laura are on the line, but I'm not sure if you heard that. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Rob.
folks. We've got, can see Louise. Can I see Peter Kelly? Is Peter around? Joe Croft, he'll be back, won't he? Sinead Carr. Sinead.
Yeah, I'm here. Shona.
Shona. Okay, sorry, Shona. Hi.
I think Shona's going to do the timing this time.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Rob Isaacs, I can see. Laura Diamond, I can see. Okay, so we're all potentially here. Is Peter Snell joining us? Do we know?
I hope so. He momentarily left the meeting as we took a break. So obviously, Councillor Fatrana Thomas has now left the meeting.
So we've got Katie back. We've got Brian back. We've got Steve back. We've got Claire not back. We've got Peter Kelly joined us. How's the boat, Peter?
Starting to get a little bit chilly at certain times. It has gone on once now, yes. Okay. Wood, not cold.
Okay.
Councillor Snell has joined us.
Okay.
So have we got all the members back?
Rob and Laura, yes, we've got everybody.
Yeah, Councillor Potter. So
I believe Councillor Potter, Chair.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. I think all the councillors are here.
I can't see Peter Snell.
Yes,
Peter,
he is. Yes, he is. Yep.
He's got a good lighting system. Well done, Peter.
Councillor Snell, can I just check your microphone's working okay? So because obviously we didn't hear you for the first item. Could you just speak for a moment? You're
okay. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Snell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Over to officers then, Louise, please.
Great. Thank you. Right. Can you all see my slide?
Coming up. Yes, we can.
Okay. Great. So item 6 is an application at Northside Studios. This is the site here. So the development's for a 2-storey roof extension to the existing mixed-use building. The new roof extension will provide 7 additional residential units. I've just included a bit of an aerial view here of the site. So you can see there's a council depot just to the north, a residential building, Crystal Court, to the east. This is an old Google Maps image, so it shows a bare site at the moment down to the south, but that's currently under construction. A part up to 7-storey mixed-use residential commercial building, variably called Ion House 1 to 3 Sheep Lane, or it's got new branding Watermark House, I think. So the site is located on the canal. The canal here is the boundary with London Borough of Tower Hamlets to the west. I've just included this quick aerial 3D image as well, just showing the back of the site here. It's a bit difficult just to take some photos, so this is kind of the best image I could show of the existing building. This is obviously a photo of the front of the site, looking from within Tower Hamlets on the other side of the canal across to the existing building. You can see Ion House, or 1 to 3 Sheep Lane, being built to the right here. This is the view from Cat and Mutton Bridge, so the bridge just to the south of Broadway Market, which just shows the building in a longer view. And I've just zoomed in a little bit here to show you what it looks like up close, but we would be standing in the canal if we could see it this big, with the building being built behind it. And here's just a photo of the current rear access of Northside Studios. The commercial units at ground floor, you can see their doors, their access doors there. And then this is the area that you access to get to the shared lift and stair core. So this just gives you an idea of the existing elevation. The building at the moment is a 4-story building. It's got 2 floors of small commercial units on the ground and first floor. So it's got 12. It's got 12 small commercial units, and then it's got 10 residential units. Each floor, second and third, has 5 2-bedroom units. This is the proposed front elevation. As you can see, they're adding an additional 2 floors to the top. The proposal design takes its cues from the existing building in that the top 2 floors are now set back from the ones below. It's replicated the glazed balconies at the top floors, which are similar to the floors below. They are proposing a new dark metal finish, which has been designed as a kind of top or cap to the building, and is a material similar in colour to traditional roofing materials. Here we've just got a picture of the proposed rear elevation. This just shows mainly that the building is extending upwards from the existing footprint of the building, with some new windows at the top here, which mainly serve bedrooms at the back. This is the proposed ground floor plan. It retains this, so the existing units, residential and commercial, are accessed from the top right-hand corner that you can see there, that go through an existing undercroft car park. The 2 car parking spaces that are there at the moment are retained, and we aren't providing any more car parking on site. A new access stair up to the first floor only is provided, and then there are cycle spaces as well. So I've just shown the proposed fourth floor plan, because this is the first new build floor. You can see that they've had to raise the stair core to the bottom left-hand corner here. This floor provides 4 new residential units, predominantly with a westerly aspect over the canal for their living rooms, with bedrooms to the rear, which largely replicates the existing situation with front-facing living rooms and rear-facing bedrooms. As you can see, each unit or each room that faces the canal has a terrace as well. The proposed 5th floor plan is slightly smaller than the 4th floor, to allow for the walkway to be sited at the back there. Again, this has a predominantly westerly aspect with balconies. And this is just a CGI view of the development from Cat and Mutton Bridge. So just to recap, the development's for an additional 2 stories on the existing mixed-use building, to provide 7 new residential units. There'll be an affordable housing contribution, and improved cycle parking for the existing and proposed residents. So it's recommended to grant planning permission subject to conditions in a legal agreement.
Thank you very much, Louise. Rob, you've seen what we've done. 5 minutes, please.
Can I just ask you, before the clock starts, Councillor stops, there's 2 supporting photos you should have received from Gareth Sykes.
We did see them, thank you.
Have you got them to hand? Everyone's got them?
We've seen
them.
them.
Cool. All right, so ready to go. So I'm representing the 31 residents, businesses and owners of Northside Studios from virtually every single unit in the building. There's 2 issues in our joint objection that have a legal and regulatory basis, and that we strongly urge you to take into account this evening. 1, significant and unacceptable loss of light. 2, poor design and inappropriate use of materials. So first, the loss of light will affect many units. So if you can see in photo 1, that's the view from my 2 rear windows. The proposed building will extend up from the top of the yellow render on both sides, reducing daylight for me by up to 62%. Now, mine are the worst affected, but every single rear window loses some light, with 13 out of 20 windows becoming non-compliant with the advised ADF threshold. So the point is, the light was already significantly reduced by the adjoining development that Louise just mentioned, which is just nearing completion. So it's not enough, to say that this development isn't incrementally too harmful. The cumulative effect is that the rear rooms become dark and gloomy. Now, the case officer's report says this is bearable as the living room is the main habitable area of the flat. But as you can see, one of my rear rooms is used as a home office for myself and my partner. And in this post-COVID era, with flexible working, this is how many residents are spending their entire days. So the loss of light is significant both in its nature and effect. Now, the second point is about poor design and inappropriate use of materials. So our objection referred to the Development Management Local Plan, the London Plan from 2015 and 16, requiring visual integrity and respect for established scale and surrounding buildings. So hopefully you can see photo 2. Now, at the top left and right of that, it shows the really careful stepping of our current and surrounding buildings, where they step up and down to the same kind of brickwork and height. Whereas this extension just totally ignores this. And the bottom shows how almost every building on the street is in brickwork, mostly yellow. And yet, the proposal is for dark grey corrugated metal cladding. Now, the case officer's report says it's a reference to the industrial character of the canal, but there's no metal anywhere near us, apart from the temporary containerville, the other side of the canal in Tower Hamlets, set back from the street and not visible from most of Andrews Road. We would hope these repurposed shipping containers are not sufficient justification for the use of this alien material. The report also states that because we're 6 metres from the Regent's Canal conservation area, there's no issues with conservation, but this is misleading. On photo 2, you can see in the centre look at the top, it shows the view from the canal towpath. We're facing directly onto the canal, and therefore it hugely affects the setting of the conservation area. Now, the Central and South Hackney CAAC have objected on this basis, saying, quote, the design is very disappointing for a major residential scheme in a very prominent location and adjacent to the Regent's Canal conservation area. It fails to fully comply with Hackney Council requirements, the design's poor, the cladding's uninspired, the increase in building height is overbearing, unacceptable, and the scheme is overdeveloped. And just so you know, those requirements they're referring to are the family homes policy, the employment policy, and the affordable housing quota, none of which are met. So despite all of these issues, the case officer's report still somehow recommends approval, saying the harm is outweighed by planning benefits in the form of 7 additional residential units and an affordable housing payment. Hopefully we've shown the recommendation is based on less than certain assumptions and conclusions and should therefore be refused. Now, we do have many other issues, as you'll see in our written objection, over security, access and amenities, all of which could have been dealt with by meaningful consultation with our developer. But this hasn't happened, and our final attempt at some questions has gone unanswered since early August. Plus, the construction management plan that was submitted after our first objection is riddled with worrying errors, impracticalities and omissions, and proposes our only lift is out of action for 8 to 10 weeks, making life impossible for the elderly, disabled and families who live in the building.
1 minute remaining.
So thank you. Although we very much hope you won't, if you are minded to approve, we would ask you to ensure the developer is bound by you to consult and respond to our many issues and concerns, and that we have approval on the final construction management plan. However, on the basis of Hackney's own laws, regulations, standards and requirements, we would strongly urge you to vote against the application due to loss of light, which will affect many working days, and the wrong choice of design and materials on a high-profile street facing onto the Regent's Canal conservation area. Thank you from the 31 co-signatories.
Thank you. Laura, please.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. This application has been submitted following pre-application discussions with the council. The proposal has been amended during the determination period to reduce the number of proposed units from 9 to 7. At the rear, the massing of the extension has been reduced so that the rear walkway does not overhang the existing walkways on the floors below. The applicant has corresponded with residents to answer queries and sent through the revised plans when they were amended. The MPPF is supportive of using airspace above existing residential and commercial buildings to provide new homes. A range of permitted development rights have also recently been introduced by the government that support residential development above existing buildings. Hackney's brand new local plan advises that almost half of Hackney's new housing is expected to be delivered on small sites, And policy LP12 states that the council will support the development of small sites to meet housing need. Given the sustainable nature of the site, located close to a range of facilities and public open spaces, it is considered to be an appropriate location for new homes. As mentioned, amendments have been made to the design in order to limit the impacts of the development to existing residents as far as possible. While some of the existing bedrooms located at the rear of the site experience impacts to daylight that fall short of the BRE criteria, this is largely due to the location of existing stair and lift core behind these units, but is being extended as part of these proposals so that the new flats are fully accessible. Unfortunately, it has not been possible to move the location of this lift core. Hackney's new local plan acknowledges that the BRE guidance should be applied flexibly to take account of site context, and dense urban environments may struggle to meet the target criteria in the existing and proposed scenarios. As set out in the committee report, the impacts are considered to be acceptable on balance when weighed against the benefits that the scheme delivers. In terms of design, the extension has been designed by GPAD architects, who are the architects for the original building. And with the 2 additional stories in place, the building will sit lower than the neighbouring development that is almost complete at Ion House, which rises up to 7 stories. Hackney's design officer has been consulted on the proposed materials during the pre-application and application stages. They are supportive of the contemporary approach and the proposed finish. The final details of the materials are proposed to be secured by a condition, and a condition is also proposed that requires a sample panel of metal cladding to be made up on site for approval by the council. We did submit a heritage statement with the application that considers impacts to the conservation area, which overall concludes that the impacts of the 2 additional stories are acceptable. In terms of construction works, the applicant will seek to ensure that the construction works minimise disruption to existing residents and tenants as far as possible. A draft construction management plan was submitted to the council. It was later revised to take account of comments made by the council's highways officer. A condition is now proposed to be attached to the decision notice that requires a detailed construction management plan to be submitted and approved before any works take place. And a Section 106 obligation is proposed to enable the council to monitor compliance with the approved document. And it should also be highlighted that in the original construction management plan, the consultant suggested that the lift could be out of action for 6 to 8 weeks. In the revised version of the document, this was revised down to approximately 1 week, and that consultant advised that that original estimate was very generous.
1 minute remaining.
Advance warning would be given to the residents ahead of the lift being out of action. In summary, the proposal provides 7 new units in a sustainable location, including 2 family units, a contribution of £350,000 towards affordable housing in accordance with Hackney's new local plan, a carbon offset contribution of almost £13,000, 47 new cycle parking spaces to serve the proposed new flats, as well as the existing flats and the office floor space that currently do not have cycle parking to meet their needs in accordance with Hackney's policy. We therefore urge members to approve the application in line with the office's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to ask any questions myself to start with, and we'll reverse order. So Steve, you're in pole position for questions.
Thank you, Chair. I think the sunlight is the main kind of concern for me on this. I think that just reading through, I think there's several flats that are affected and 1 flat that's very severely affected with over 60% loss of light from current standards. This is all for 7 additional flats on top of the building. So can we just explore the sunlight a bit more? I know that we go through sunlight quite often, but it's quite important.
Okay, Louise, can you talk us through you've done quite a bit in the report. If we can go through each one, starting with Mr. Isaac, if his is the worst affected, please.
Yeah, sure. So the daylight and sunlight report, there's two, one for the surrounding buildings and one for the existing building, assessed the current units within the site, both from a ADF point of view, which measures light within the room, and also a vertical sky component, which measures the amount of sky you can see from the window. There is a significant loss of light, or noticeable loss of light, to one of those units, but it's to both of the bedrooms. However, we think that because the unit, which has a westerly aspect, and the living room kitchen faces west and wouldn't be affected, that it is acceptable in this instance, as it's just the one flat that's largely affected. It's also the bedrooms facing east, the ones that are going to face the extended stair core. There's two bedrooms, so one would look onto the stair core, the other one would suffer a loss of light, but would face out through more of the gap towards the rear of the site.
Okay, and can you tell Steve why you think that's acceptable? As sort of the thinking behind this. I mean, it's not a black and white thing, I know that, but how do you come to that conclusion?
And sorry, Chair, and it would also be useful to know within sort of how we come to the conclusion. What's it based on? Is it based on the impact of the 7 new kind of units, or is it the impact on the number of flats already in existence, I suppose? What's the sort of quantum?
So it's not a kind of numbers issue in the fact that you're looking at how many are affected versus how many aren't. But given we've mentioned that one would be affected to the rear, but we think that overall, given the living room, which is the main kind of living accommodation in a unit, still is unaffected because it faces west over the canal, that overall the unit is considered to retain an acceptable level of daylight.
And I believe it's within policy, isn't it? The national policy, is it, that the living room is considered to be more important, as it were, for sunlight than bedrooms? Is that right?
Yes, there's a higher percentage of light required for living rooms than there is for bedrooms.
Okay, thank you. I think just the final point, Chair, from me is I do find it. I believe this is a non-material planning concern, but I'm going to say anyway, Chair. I do believe that it's. I do find it disappointing when developments like this are going on top of other people, that there's less engagement with those residents.
Steve, and you've got to strike that from your mind. I mean, I will read the Riot Act to members. But we have got to focus on material planning considerations, because if we don't, we lose an appeal, we lose badly. So there are some issues between the landowner and the leaseholders that are nothing to do with us. We've got to strike those from our minds. So yes, one would like the developer to consult and to do this and that and the other, but they really don't have to in terms of the decision making that we are involved in this evening.
Agreed, Chair.
Next one is, we're going backwards. Claire, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to build a little bit on what Steve has said, but hopefully I can do it in a planning related way. So in relation to what Steve said, and in terms of the impact on residents, I presume a lot of this detail is going to be included in the construction management plan. So can the developer talk a little bit more, and officers, about how this is going to be to address these concerns?
Okay.
Isn't it?
Yes, happy to do that. Laura.
So we've obviously submitted a draft construction management plan with our application. It wasn't requested when we submitted, so it's not a kind of validation requirement for a scheme of this size. We did submit it. It was completed by a consultant who is a specialist on this matter. It was intended to be a kind of draft document, as we expected that the full document would be conditioned, as is usually the case. The document was reviewed by Hackney's transport officer. We received comments back on the document and revised it and submitted that back to the council. We didn't receive any further comments, but it has been conditioned, so we will deal with all aspects relating to construction management in the full kind of construction management plan. The developer will also aim to notify residents regarding the construction process and keep them informed about what works are taking place and when, to make sure everyone's kind of fully informed about the process.
Thank you, Louise. Are we? Is it in the right direction? Clearly it's conditioned, so it'll have to go a bit further. But is it going in the right direction? Can you tell us?
Yes, I mean the construction management plan addresses issues, in particular in relation to highways and the control of dust. We've had some comments from the air quality officer who requested that additional comments were put in relating to ensuring that dust wasn't an issue for existing residents. So there have been issues that have been raised that have been put into the plan, but yes, our understanding is that because it'll need to be a full final draft construction management plan, that it'll be addressed at the condition stage.
Thank you. Is that all, Claire?
I guess so.
Okay. Brian, please.
Could someone talk me through how we came to the affordable housing contribution and confirm what it is?
Yes, I heard 350,000, but I read 175.
Yeah, I thought I had a different figure from the port.
Sorry, I'll answer that. Yeah, it's 350,000. I just noticed in my report, I fixed it in one part of the addendum, but not in the report writing, but it's in the recommendation B as 350,000. There was a slight misunderstanding about how we applied the new local plan policy and the residential contributions SPD, but we've sorted that out now, and it's been amended in the document to be 350,000. So that's a £50,000 payment per new unit, so 50 times 7.
Okay, that's what I was confused about. I was reading 7.4.1 and that didn't make sense in the end, but that resolves it for me. That's all, Vincent.
Thank you. And Peter, please.
Well, I've learnt my lesson. That was so frustrating watching the last item and not being able to participate. So I must remember, Vincent, you are absolutely scrupulous about starting on time. So on this report, it's absolutely great. I mean, this is the sort of development that used to send us really wild in the old days, you know, build 10 units at a time and get no contribution to affordable housing, or less than 10 units. That's absolutely fantastic, but at last our plans are getting that contribution to affordable housing, which we desperately need in Hackney. So I like that aspect of the development. But picking up what the CAC was saying, the Central Hackney Conservation Area Advisory Committee, I don't think we've had a discussion, and I've raised this at previous planning committees, on the justification for grey corrugated panels. Now, the point is, I can understand from the canal that this is stepped back and it makes it less intrusive. But, I mean, we have asked for this, and I don't think it's yet been set up, a briefing on how one comes to these views. We seem to be getting recommendations from officers that somehow grey panels are, you know, fit in with an industrial townscape or whatever. As I say, I can understand it in terms of making it look lower, but it doesn't look good. And in fact, the current flats, you know, the third and fourth story that's there at the moment, do look good. So I'd just like to hear some justification from the relevant design officers, if I could, please.
Peter, please. Peter Kelly. Am I right in thinking it's Peter Kelly? Is he?
Looks like he might
I
be
think it's frozen.
He's frozen. Okay, Matt, can you help us?
Is Matt still with us on this call?
Possibly Luciana.
Luciana.
Right, Luciana's covering this.
Oh, Peter's back.
Peter's back.
Peter's back.
Ah, Peter's back.
Perfect timing, as always, for my data to do something strange.
Okay, Peter. So we want a good explanation of why I think it's black corrugation is a good thing on this site.
Okay. The objector is right. There's not a lot of black corrugation.
It's councillor.
Oh, and the councillor. Sorry. The councillor is right. There's not a lot of that black metal corrugated material along the canal, but there is use. It is used in a few quite good developments in nearby parts of Hackney, and those examples have all been included in the design and access statement. While it isn't common at the moment on the canal, it did used to be quite a common building material along the canal, or a cladding material. And if you look in the Regent's Canal Conservation Area appraisal, the second photo in that document shows a very large building, historic building, clad in corrugated metal. So that was one of the things that swayed me to sort of accepting the architect's choice material. Although that material was in a different sort of color, reddish brown color, we thought that a grey. Have I disappeared again?
No, you're okay.
Everyone froze. We thought that a grey material, a grey color, which matched the grey of the ground and first floor, would be an appropriate color. Also, grey is commonly associated, or dark grey and black colors are commonly associated with terminating roof or top stories. We considered brick, because brick is a common, the common material along the canal, yellow brick. But it would be quite unusual, we thought, to have yellow brick above a rendered second and third floor. It would look odd, and the applicant can't change the materials on the lower sections of the buildings as well. Also, this material is a lightweight material, and the construction needs to be lightweight. So the material's also being used in a slightly interesting way. The panels are being orientated sort of alternately diagonal, which creates an interesting visual effect if you view it from as you move around the building.
Okay, so you're convinced, are you, Peter?
I'm comfortable.
Okay, should we, I think this is an area that we want one of our officer member discussions. I think clarity is needed in this area, but I commend Peter on a very good explanation. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, we can talk about how we'll condition this, or whether we're interested enough to go back and have a look, because you are asking for some mock-up panels, aren't you, Peter?
Yes, just to make sure that we get all the details of this. It's a slightly unusual cladding. We want the details to be right, so we've asked for a mock-up panel, which the applicants agreed to produce.
Thank you. Katie.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the cladding as well, and again, more of a comment than a question, but I mean, the officer is absolutely correct that planning policy does support building on top of existing buildings, and we have consented large numbers of developments like this with setback top floors, very often in different materials from the sort of host building. I do think, I mean, the existing residents understandably are really worried about the impact on them, and although things like noise and dust from construction are not material planning considerations, I do think the construction management plan is going to be really key here, because it's going to have stuff about things like how the materials will get onto the site, whether they are, whether they're sort of taken up, any materials are taken up to the top through the existing building, or whether everything's going to arrive by crane. So I do think if we're minded to approve this, we should definitely ask for the construction management plan to come back. And just building on what Steve said, I realise that we can't refuse an application on the basis that the applicant hasn't done consultation that they're not required to do by law.
Thank you.
But we can ask them going forward to consult with the existing residents on the construction management plan, and I think we should ask them to do that.
Okay, well, I think you voiced your concern, and whether they do that or not is up to them, you know, and we can't intervene in how they run their business.
Can we strongly advise them then?
Say that, and I've allowed you to say it. Okay. The construction management plan, yes, let's come back. Let's go and have a look at this. We actually went and had a look at the corrugation on the Olympic Park, the media building, and I know Mayor Pipe took a great deal of interest in that. So perhaps we can be invited along to have a look, and I'll take. We've got two. If we are minded to approve it, we can take Peter along, I'm sure, and have a look, and anybody else who wants to come. Any more questions? Okay. So the recommendation with those couple of conditions. One is that the construction management plan comes back, and so does the issue of the material. We've got a recommendation, and the recommendation is to grant planning permission, subject conditions, and completion of legal agreement. All those in favour, please show. Okay, I'll now read you out. Vincent is in favour. Steve Race?
In favour, Chair.
Katie?
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Snell?
Sorry, in favour.
Councillor Potter?
In favour.
Councillor Bell?
In favour.
That's all of us. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Just one more item, and that is the delegated decisions. Please take a note of them. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much. So we won't be meeting next Tuesday.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. Is anybody coming to the Bishopsgate site tomorrow?
Could you remind us of the details?
You guys, was anybody interested to come to the Bishopsgate site? Weren't they asked?
I haven't heard about it at all.
No.
Think about it.
I don't recall being invited, but it's possible I have